Folks, welcome back to the asylum. If you thought 2025 was the year the world lost its mind, buckle up, because 2026 just handed someone a beer and said, "Watch this." We are sitting on the edge of a global trade war, a diplomatic crisis that has NATO tearing itself apart, and potentially the first hostile annexation of Western territory by a Western power since maps were drawn with charcoal. And why? Why are we threatening to bankrupt Europe? Why are we sending the Navy to the Arctic Circle? Is it aliens? Is it a sudden moral awakening to protect the seals? No. It's because the Prime Minister of Norway didn't give Donald Trump a medal. I am not making this up. You cannot make this up. We have reports, confirmed reports, that the President of the United States sent a text message to the leader of Norway saying he can, and I quote, no longer think purely of peace because he was snubbed for the Nobel Prize. I can no longer think purely of peace. That sounds like a line from a Bond villain who just pet a white cat, but it's actually American foreign policy in 2026. Because he didn't get his shiny gold participation trophy, he has decided to pivot. He's done playing Mr. Nice Guy. He's done with the art of the deal. Now we're doing the art of the shakedown. We are watching a geopolitical temper tantrum escalate into a hostile corporate takeover of an entire island. And not just any island. Greenland, the biggest ice cube in the world. The establishment media is scrambling. They're talking about strategic imperatives. They're talking about Arctic security. They're using big words to hide a very simple, very stupid reality. The boss is mad. He wants a new toy. And he's going to burn down the neighborhood until he gets it. This isn't new. We've seen this before. Go back to the 2008 financial crash. The banks gambled with your money, lost it all, and then demanded you bail them out to save the economy. Go back to the Patriot Act. They demanded your privacy to stop the terrorists. And 20 years later, they're using those tools to spy on parents at school board meetings. Now, they are demanding Greenland to secure the Arctic, but really, it's just to secure the supply chain for the next generation of iPhones and Tesla batteries. They privatize the gains, the minerals, the contracts, the power, and they socialize the losses, the inflation, the instability, the boys coming home in boxes from wars that serve no purpose. The rules-based order is dead. It has been replaced by the loot-based order. If it's not nailed down, they're taking it. And if it is nailed down, they're bringing a crowbar. So when you see the headlines about Greenland or the UN or tariffs, don't get sucked into the details of the diplomatic crisis. Recognize the pattern. The elites are cashing out. They are stripping the copper wiring out of the walls of Western civilization before the building collapses, and they are counting on you being too distracted, too scared, or too tribal to notice. But we notice it is a global movement toward total unaccountability. And here is the darkest part of the joke. While these masters of the universe are busy playing real estate tycoon in the Arctic, while they are busy dismantling the UN, they are proving in real time that they are completely incompetent at actually protecting us. You want proof? Look at Syria. While the White House is drafting architectural plans for the Golden Dome missile shield, thousands of ISIS fighters just walked out of a prison in Syria. Thousands. They didn't tunnel out like Shawshank Redemption. They didn't have a high-tech heist. They walked out because of a chaotic handover. That's the official term. Chaotic handover. That is bureaucrat speak for, we forgot to lock the door because we were too busy arguing about tariffs. This is the scam, folks. This is the hustle. They tell you they need more power, more money, and more territory to keep you safe. They need Greenland to protect you from Russia. They need to monitor your internet to protect you from disinformation. They need to tariff your car to protect the economy. But when an actual threat like an army of terrorists who want to behead people is sitting in a cage, The system is too incompetent to keep them there. It's like paying a security company $1 million a year to install a laser grid around your house, and then coming home to find the front door wide open and the guards asleep on the lawn. And that brings us to the final question, the one that nobody in Washington or Brussels wants to answer. If the rules are gone, what happens when the rest of the world stops pretending to follow them, too? And if you need more proof that the inmates are running the asylum, just look at the ticker tape of incompetence scrolling across the bottom of your screen. Look at Russia. We have reports of a U.S. Staff Sergeant, Gordon Black, getting sentenced to nearly 5 years in a penal colony. The reports say he was forced to admit guilt. He's being used as a political poker chip. And what is the response from our glorious leaders? Silence. Crickets. If this were a celebrity basketball player or a donor's nephew who got caught with a vape pen, we'd be trading arms dealers and emptying the strategic oil reserve to get them home. But a veteran? A guy who actually wore the uniform? He's just a statistic. He's collateral damage in the great game. They'll let him rot until they need a photo op for the midterms. Then you have Iran. The regime there has locked the country into a darker digital blackout because they view the unrestricted internet as an existential threat. Don't laugh at them. Don't think, oh, those crazy dictators. Take notes, because there are people in Washington, in London, and in Brussels who are looking at that headline and nodding. They're jealous. They call it fighting misinformation or protecting democracy, but the goal is exactly the same. If you control the feed, you control the cattle. Iran is just doing the beta testing for the rest of us. And let's not forget the cherry on top of this excrement sundae, the ISIS jailbreak in Syria. We spent trillions of dollars on the war on terror, we gave up our privacy, we took off our shoes at the airport for 20 years, and in the end, the experts couldn't even manage a handover of a prison without letting the bad guys walk out the front door. Chaotic handover, they call it. You know what I call it? A breach of contract. And that brings us to the final question, the one that nobody in Washington or Brussels wants to answer. If the rules are gone, what happens when the rest of the world stops pretending to follow them, too? And if you need more proof that the inmates are running the asylum, just look at the ticker tape of incompetence scrolling across the bottom of your screen. Look at Russia. We have reports of a U.S. Staff Sergeant, Gordon Black, getting sentenced to nearly 5 years in a penal colony. The reports say he was forced to admit guilt. He's being used as a political poker chip. And what is the response from our glorious leaders? Silence. Crickets. If this were a celebrity basketball player or a donor's nephew who got caught with a vape pen, we'd be trading arms dealers and emptying the strategic oil reserve to get them home. But a veteran? A guy who actually wore the uniform? He's just a statistic. He's collateral damage in the great game. They'll let him rot until they need a photo op for the midterms. Then you have Iran. The regime there has locked the country into a darker digital blackout because they view the unrestricted internet as an existential threat. Don't laugh at them. Don't think, oh, those crazy dictators. Take notes, because there are people in Washington, in London, and in Brussels who are looking at that headline and nodding. They're jealous. They call it fighting misinformation or protecting democracy, but the goal is exactly the same. If you control the feed, you control the cattle. Iran is just doing the beta testing for the rest of us. And let's not forget the cherry on top of this excrement sundae, the ISIS jailbreak in Syria. We spent trillions of dollars on the war on terror, we gave up our privacy, we took off our shoes at the airport for 20 years, and in the end, the experts couldn't even manage a handover of a prison without letting the bad guys walk out the front door. Chaotic handover, they call it. You know what I call it? A breach of contract. But let's zoom out. If you think this is just about Donald Trump having a bad day or wanting to build a golf course on a glacier, you are missing the point. You are looking at the puppet, not the strings. What is happening in Greenland and what is happening at the United Nations is not an accident. It is a pattern. It is the final suffocating death rattle of the so-called rules-based international order. You know that phrase, right? The elites love it. They whisper it at Davos. They toast to it in Brussels, the rules-based order. It sounds nice. It implies that there is a referee. It implies that whether you are the United States or Uruguay, the rules are the same. And this week, we got the confirmation of what we have always known. That was a lie. We have UN Secretary General Guterres crying to the press, literally clutching his pearls, saying that the United States is putting power over international law. He's shocked. He's appalled. He's acting like a casino manager finding out there's gambling going on in the back room. Mr. Guterres, wake up. International law has always been a bedtime story we tell developing nations so they don't build nukes. It's a velvet rope that keeps the rabble out of the VIP section. The Trump administration's response to the UN wasn't a denial. It was a threat. They told the UN to adapt, shrink, or die. Think about those words. Adapt, shrink, die. That is the language of a corporate raider liquidating a failing subsidiary. It is the language of a mafia don telling the local beat cop that his services are no longer required because the family runs the neighborhood now. This is the pattern we are seeing everywhere. The consolidation of power and the elimination of referees. They are tearing down the institutions that are supposed to check their power because those institutions are inconvenient. Why bother arguing with the UN Security Council about invading a country or seizing a territory when you can just starve them of funding and ignore them? It's the same logic we see in the digital realm. Look at Iran. While we are distracted by the shiny object of Greenland, the Iranian regime has plunged its entire nation into a digital blackout. They view the internet as an existential threat. Why? Because the internet is a referee. It's a witness. If you kill the internet, you kill the witness. If you kill the UN, you kill the judge. And if you buy Greenland with a gun to Europe's head, you prove that the police have been defunded. We have reports that Germany is already pulling its 15 soldiers out. 15! They probably all piled into one minivan and drove to the airport. The EU isn't preparing for war. They're preparing a surrender treaty that allows them to keep selling BMWs to New Jersey. This exposes the dirty little secret of the NATO alliance that nobody in Washington wants to admit. Europe is not our partner. They are a client state. They are a tenant living in a building owned by the United States. Here is the analogy that explains this whole mess. Imagine you are renting an apartment. Your landlord, that's the US, decides he wants your dog. He thinks the dog is cool. He thinks he can breed the dog and make money. You say, "No, that's my dog." So the landlord doesn't break down your door immediately. No, that would be illegal. Instead, he doubles your rent. He turns off the hot water. He hires a guy to stand outside your window and rev a chainsaw all night. And then he sends you a text, "I wouldn't have to do this if you had just voted me Landlord of the Year at the HOA meeting." That is where we are. The Europeans are realizing that their alliance with America was really just a subscription service for protection, and they let the subscription lapse. They thought they were equals. They thought international law was a real thing that would protect them. But as we are seeing with Golden Dome, laws are for poor people and small countries. When you have the world's reserve currency and the world's biggest navy, the law is whatever you write on the back of a napkin. Trump is effectively telling the world, I have the guns, I have the money, I want the ice. Adapt or die. And the most terrifying part? It's working. The Europeans are backing down. The defense of Greenland is evaporating because nobody in Paris or Berlin is willing to lose 10% of their GDP to protect a bunch of ice and snow. So, while the media argues about the morality of it, the deal is practically already done. We are witnessing the ultimate might makes right moment of the 21st century. And it all started because of a text message about a Nobel Prize. You couldn't write a script this dumb if you tried. But wait, it gets better. Because while we're busy bullying our allies over ice cubes, the guys who actually want to kill us are having a field day. Let's talk about the United Nations. Let's dig into this. Because the official story being peddled by the White House and parroted by the networks is insulting your intelligence. The administration is calling this Operation Golden Dome. Even the name sounds like a failed Trump casino in Atlantic City, doesn't it? They tell us This is about defense. They say we need to turn Greenland into a fortress to stop the Russians and the Chinese from dominating the Arctic. They tell you it's about a missile shield to protect the free world. That is the lie. That is the shiny object they dangle in front of you, so you nod your head and say, oh, well, safety first. Here is the real truth. This has nothing to do with missiles, and it certainly has nothing to do with protecting the good people of Denmark. This is a real estate transaction. It's a foreclosure auction, and the United States is the only bidder. Trump looks at Greenland, and he doesn't see a sovereign territory with a unique culture and history. He sees a distressed asset. He sees a massive, undervalued parking lot full of rare earth minerals that are suddenly accessible because the ice is melting. He sees shipping lanes. He sees money. And frankly, in his world, if you aren't using the asset, you don't deserve to keep it. The methodology here is breathtakingly cynical. It's a hostile corporate takeover applied to a sovereign nation. He made an offer to buy it. Denmark said no. They said, we are not for sale. A reasonable position for a country to take, right? Imagine if your neighbor knocked on your door and offered to buy your garage. You say no, so the next day, he parks a tank on your lawn and cuts the brake lines on your car. That is exactly what's happening. The moment Denmark refused to sell, the White House announced a 10% tariff on all European goods. 10%. Boom, just like that. And this is where the comedy kicks in. This is where the hypocrisy of the European leaders is on full display. For the last week, we heard the Europeans puffing out their chests. The EU leaders were giving speeches about solidarity. They were talking about protecting the sovereignty of our member states. Denmark even ramped up defenses. They sent troops. Do you know how many troops they sent? A few dozen. To defend an island 3 times the size of Texas. It was a joke. It was theater. And the very second Trump threatened their wallets with those tariffs, what happened? Did they stand firm? Did they hold the line for democracy and international law? No. They folded like a cheap lawn chair.